Could you imagine the near future when the dollar in your wallet still looks fine, but it quietly stops buying you food? Not a warning, because it's already happening across America. Beloved chains like McDonald's, Subway, and KFC are disappearing, even when we still count on it, simply because the dollar they rely on is no longer enough to keep the lights on. In just 2 years, over 1,800 fast food locations have shut their doors permanently because China, without firing a shot, has rewritten the rules of global trade. In 2025, Beijing told its banks to cut back all US dollar-based transactions. Since then, importers are demanding payment in other currencies. Ingredients cost more, workers are laid off, prices soar, and the food you need is no longer here, a market worth over $40 trillion. Now slipping out of America's grip, more about just exchange rates, it could be access to food, to work, to what used to be called stability. This is the Downturn Report, where the truth gets personal, and today, we discover 10 big restaurant chains going out of business by China canceling trade in USD. Let's see when your money can't buy food anymore. What else might be quietly stolen from your everyday life? Number 1. Pizza Hut. A restaurant chain so huge that it fed over 12 million Americans each week. But now, it's most likely will disappear soon because another country no longer wants USD. We're talking about Pizza Hut, and its fall down would be the first sign of a world quietly walking away from the US dollar. According to expert prediction, worse, following it is the very meals we grew up on, back in its golden era. Pizza Hut was everywhere, and people thought its empire would last forever. With more than 7,500 locations across the country by the late 1990s, it was woven into the rhythm of American life. Birthday parties, Friday night dinners, a reward for good grades. Pizza Hut was the cheap meal that reminded working families they still had something left over after paying the bills. But as of early 2025, the decline is undeniable. Over 220 Pizza Hut locations have shut down since 2023, many in Middle America, from Indiana to Mississippi. According to Yum Brand's latest reports, franchisees are struggling with what they call unsurvivable costs, and that's where the story turns global, because in late 2024, China took a decisive step, accelerating its transition away from the US dollar. By the start of 2025, over 30% of its global transactions were conducted in yuan, nearly double from just 2 years before. Global suppliers followed. Someone whispered about a currency shift becoming a pricing war, with a $40 trillion GDP in purchasing power parity. China's influence forced exporters across Asia and Latin America to demand payment in yuan or euros, and that's the very reason left American companies, like Pizza Hut, scrambling. The dollar's value dropped nearly 6% in just the first few months of 2025. For Pizza Hut, which depends heavily on imported wheat, cheese, and packaging, this meant ingredient costs spiraled out of control. Unlike Papa John's, which localized its supply chain early and built digital kitchens, Pizza Hut remained tied to international contracts, and now those contracts collapsed. But the news doesn't show you how the situation affects normal people. 100 jobs losses in towns that already have too few jobs, delivery drivers sent home without severance, elderly customers, once reliant on low-cost delivery, now face 40-minute drives to the nearest grocery store. A hot dinner, once affordable, now becomes teeters toward luxury. And deeper than all of that, an unspoken fear spreads. If even pizza isn't safe in this economy, does our life still have much security left now? But let's look at the bright side. As fast food vanishes, many Americans turn back to their home kitchen again, with fewer fast meals. Early reports suggest a modest drop in obesity-related emergency visits in counties hardest hit by closures. Perhaps, in this slow disintegration, something healthier is growing. But still, it's fragile compared to the pain, the confusion and disappointment in people just yet. When a country's currency is no longer accepted without question, what else might it lose besides its favorite pizza? Number 2, McDonald's. What happens when the most trusted meal in America becomes the first to vanish, even when we still need it? But the world quietly stopped accepting the currency it was priced in. McDonald's, the red and yellow cornerstone of everyday American life, is no longer as stable as we thought. And behind the golden arches lies a much darker warning. Even the $1 burger can fall when the dollar is no longer welcome at its peak. McDonald's operated over 14,000 restaurants in the US, serving nearly 70 million customers globally each day. It was a giant, and so much independence as America in the good old days. More than just food, McDonald's was what you got on a road trip, after church and between shifts. For millions who live paycheck to paycheck, it was a sign that shows they're still in control of life, because the meals are still familiar and affordable. But by 2025, that familiarity is disappearing. And same with the independence symbol of America. CNBC confirms that more than 500 McDonald's locations have closed since late 2022, hitting hardest in cities like Oakland, Cleveland, and St. Louis. The reason its supply chains are tied to a currency the world no longer trusts. Early in 2025, China's central bank initiated sweeping internal reforms, shifting from dollar-based imports to yuan settlements, pushing yuan trade from 25% to over 40%, since China plays a major role in producing food packaging, frozen ingredients, and sauces. McDonald's now faces pricing instability for basics like wrappers, cooking oil, and potato flakes. The dollar, having lost its value since January, can no longer secure the same volume or price, unlike Chick-fil-A, which quietly moved much of its production domestically. McDonald's stayed global, and eventually it got caught in the middle. Meanwhile, Chinese exporters now demand yuan, and that small shift rippled across every drive-thru in America. But economic forces weren't the only problem. In 2024, internal documents revealed lawsuits by US franchisees against McDonald's corporate leadership for forcing them to absorb rising commodity costs without lowering royalty demands. That power imbalance left small operators bleeding cash, and the public hasn't forgotten the 2020 scandal involving McDonald's former CEO, who was ousted for ethical violations while receiving a nearly $40 million payout. For many, that moment marked the brand's moral decline, even before the financial one, but the result of all this hitting people who do absolutely nothing wrong. Entire neighborhoods now lack a single reliable food option for thousands of working-class families. McDonald's was the last nearby hot meal. Elderly residents in rural towns depended on it for low cost. No judgment dinners. Teenagers relied on it for their first paycheck. Now, the lights are off, the playgrounds are empty, and the American promise of fast, affordable food for all has quietly expired. Yet amid the collapse, Americans learn the way to comfort each other, learning to cook, planting vegetables, and cutting back on deep-fried meals. Some health departments have even reported slight drops in emergency visits related to obesity and hypertension. Perhaps the fall of McDonald's signals not just the end of convenience, but the start of something slower and healthier. Still, the unease lingers. If McDonald's, the $200 billion symbol of American routine, can't protect your $5 lunch when the dollar slips, what's the future waiting for us now? Number 3, KFC. Let's face a hard question. When America's most famous chicken is now too expensive to fry, what's left for families already struggling to put anything on the table for decades? KFC meant more than fast food. It was the quick meal after church, payday dinners, and something warm to share in places where options were few. By 2015, the brand operated over 4,300 US locations across the country. An 8-piece bucket under $15 fed whole families. It was accessible, familiar, and always there for us. But between 2023 and early 2025, that image has quietly broken apart. According to Yum Brands' report, over 270 US KFC stores have shut down, most in low-income areas already designated as food deserts, like Jackson, Mississippi, and Gary, Indiana. Operating profits dropped over 14% year over year, driven largely by rising international costs and a collapse in US dollar purchasing power. KFC's supply chain leans heavily on international processing, with chicken seasoning from Southeast Asia, packaging from China, and part of its poultry processed in Latin America, once these imports were priced in US dollars. But starting in early 2025, China increased its yuan-based global trade share to over 40%. Exporters began rejecting USD or inflating prices, combined with the US losing over 40,000 farms since 2021, driving up chicken feed and transport costs. KFC's margins imploded. China's move gave it strategic control. With a $40 trillion GDP, its ability to dictate trade terms has expanded. Meanwhile, America responded with tariffs and tighter trade rules, but that only worsened sourcing challenges for companies like Yum Brands. KFC, dependent on global flow and uniform pricing, was hit hardest. Worse still, ethical cracks widened. In late 2023, KFC's parent company quietly settled class action lawsuits over suppliers using inhumane poultry conditions overseas. Reports from investigative journalists uncovered farms with severe animal mistreatment, unsanitary conditions, and falsified audits. And a 2022 internal leak revealed executives had considered shrinking portions while hiding it from menus, described in internal emails as a visual deception strategy, while other brands warned customers about inflation. KFC concealed it and lost trust or even the most loyal fan. You can hate KFC, but for thousands of families in underserved communities, it was sustenance. Many relied on it not just for food, but for employment, especially for low-income people, disabled workers, and teens looking for a start. Now, entire zip codes are left without a single warm meal option within walking distance. Single parents and elderly residents can't always cook from scratch, and now they're left with empty plates. Meanwhile, competitors like Raising Cane's and Bojangles weathered the storm by sourcing domestically and maintaining simpler menus. Chick-fil-A, with fewer international contracts, kept stores open despite higher prices. But KFC, caught in the middle, failed to pivot. And just when we think the meal is gone, so is the meaning. Because if even fried chicken, a symbol of American comfort, can be lost to currency shifts, then what's about everything else on the menu now? Imagine what happens when a brand built entirely around cheap, healthy value meals begins to face the same storm. That's where we turn next. Number 4, Subway. Picture the day the healthiest meal you could still afford just vanished because your dollars couldn't buy stuff anymore. There was a time when the $5 footlong felt like a small victory. Fresh vegetables, lean meats, baked bread. Subway was a dependable meal that didn't break the bank. At its peak in 2014, Subway had over 27,000 stores in the US, more than McDonald's and Starbucks combined. But today, that choice is quietly fading. Since 2020, over 5,300 Subway stores have closed, especially in rural towns across the Midwest and Appalachia. In early 2025, franchisees reported profits down another 18%, citing skyrocketing costs for protein and packaging, and a steep drop in foot traffic. At the center of the collapse is the weakening of the US dollar. Subway relies heavily on cold-cut meats and condiments sourced through international suppliers. As China pushed global trade toward the yuan, many suppliers began charging more for dollar-based deals. Combined with a 6% USD devaluation since January, importing turkey, ham, and even mayonnaise has become painfully expensive. China's move protects its economy from dollar volatility and increases global confidence in the yuan. For the US retaliation has been minimal. Diplomacy has replaced enforcement, while companies like Subway are left navigating a new world without a financial map. But part of Subway's fall came from within. Scandals, like the 2021 lab test questioning whether their tuna was real, or the leaked 2023 memo advising stores to reuse day-old vegetables. They all eroded public trust, and the shadow of its former spokesperson's criminal case never truly left the brand. Now, what's left behind is emptiness. Subway was often the only fresh food option in gas stations, hospitals, and school zones. Its disappearance means many communities are left with nothing but fried food and vending machines. A meal that once cost $6 now approaches $13. If you can find a location at all, other brands like Jersey Mike's have adapted with local sourcing and slower growth. Subway, stretched too thin, didn't move fast enough. And if even a simple sandwich can be erased by distant financial battles, what's going to happen when the meals aren't even pretending to be fresh anymore? Number 5, Burger King. The king of budget burgers is quietly losing his crown, and not because the food changed, but because the dollar it's priced in no longer holds the same weight. Burger King was once the working man's comfort, flame-grilled, fast, and just affordable enough to feel like a treat without the guilt. By the early 2010s, it had more than 7,000 locations across the US, anchored in neighborhoods where a $6 Whopper combo could stretch a tight paycheck. The slogan, "Have it your way," wasn't just advertising, it was real. But since 2022, over 400 Burger King stores have shut their doors. Small towns in Ohio, Michigan, and Arkansas have been hit hardest, according to RBI's 2025 earnings report. Many franchisees unable to keep up with mounting supply costs have walked away or filed bankruptcy. Behind the counters, lights have gone out. No goodbye, just silence. The cracks began with the dollar's quiet retreat from global trust. As China expanded yuan-based trade to 40% of its global transactions, regions supplying Burger King's ingredients, Asia, Latin America, and Canada began charging more for USD settlements. The dollar's value, weakened by 6% since January, no longer guaranteed buying power. Beef, sauces, even buns cost more, and Burger King, without backup plans or regional sourcing, simply couldn't absorb it. And yet, part of the damage came from within. In 2023, Burger King faced public backlash after a Reuters investigation revealed the use of expired meat blends at select stores, tied to cost-cutting orders during inflation spikes. That same year, a viral video from a former employee exposed the routine reuse of fryer oil far past safety standards. Corporate's muted response made things worse. What should have been reform became retreat. These closures carry weight. Burger King was often the only open kitchen after midnight in working-class towns. Truckers, nurses, warehouse crews all relied on it for warmth, calories, and a short break from exhaustion. Now, with the doors shut, some families drive miles for a meal they once walked to, and every closed store means 30 fewer jobs, most held by students, single parents, or seniors needing part-time hours to survive. And when even a paper crown crumples under the pressure of a slipping currency, what else might fall before we're ready to see it go? Number 6. Wendys. The burger that once promised fresh, never frozen, is now too expensive to keep on believing in, and for many Americans. That's more than just a menu change, it's the quiet unraveling of something we used to trust. Wendy's earned its place as the smarter, cleaner, more honest fast food. Square patties, real lettuce, a spicy nugget with some bite. By the 2010s, it had over 6,500 US locations and a loyal customer base working families who saw value without sacrificing quality. But in early 2025, cracks have deepened. More than 200 stores have shuttered since 2023, many in Pennsylvania, Illinois, and West Virginia. SEC filings show margins have dropped 12% in just a year. At the heart of the collapse is the dollar. Wendy's relies on fresh beef from the US and Canada, lettuce and tomatoes from Mexico, and packaging sourced through East Asia. As China expands yuan-based global trade to over 40%, suppliers demand yuan or charge more for USD. The dollar's 6% drop in early 2025 worsens the impact. Every fresh item now costs more weekly, unpredictably. Wendy's strength avoiding frozen inventory has turned into a vulnerability, unlike McDonald's, which warehouses frozen goods to ride out market spikes. Wendy's buys fresh daily, and the market, shaken by China's quiet currency shift and collapsing American farms, no longer plays fair. Meanwhile, Washington offers little support. Trade talks stall. No subsidies ease the pain. Chains like Culver's or In-N-Out, with tighter supply control, are surviving. Wendy's, spread thin, is exposed. Even worse, trust has frayed. In 2022, wage theft lawsuits surfaced, followed by a 2024 E. coli scare where corporate allegedly ignored early warnings. Customers forgave once, but now, with prices soaring, that forgiveness is gone. For many towns, a Wendy's cup of chili or baked potato was the last warm, balanced meal left. Now, people face longer drives, colder food, and fewer jobs. Part-timers, seniors, and single parents relied on Wendy's flexibility. Those doors are closing, when even the most honest burger can't survive the weight of a crumbling dollar. It begs the question, what's next for everyone else still holding on? Number 8. Dominos. The pizza that once arrived in 30 minutes or less now doesn't arrive at all because the dollar can't pay for the cheese anymore. Domino's wasn't just about pizza, it was a system, a promise, a warm box at your door when the fridge was empty and time was tight. With over 6,000 stores across the US by 2019, it became America's most trusted fallback. But by 2025, even this machine is slowing down. More than 130 US locations have closed since mid-2023. Profit margins are down 9.5%, and franchisees say the real problem isn't speed, it's cost. Behind every slice is a supply chain stretched thin. Mozzarella, the core of every pie, is now priced in yuan or euros, as China's trade policy shifts global exporters away from US dollar deals, with the yuan now used in over 40% of China's international transactions. American buyers are pushed aside or forced to pay more. US skostis kameniu. Based cheese producers, still reeling from fertilizer shortages and farm closures, can't fill the gap. Flour isn't safe either. Imports from Canada and Europe, once stable, are now tangled in currency misalignment. A 6% dollar devaluation since early 2025 means dough now costs more, arrives slower, or doesn't show up at all. Dominos, built for fast delivery and thin margins, simply can't outrun global pricing chaos. Meanwhile, internal cracks have widened. In 2022, the Tips for Drivers campaign drew outrage after it was revealed to mask wage cuts. Then, a 2023 scandal exposed flour fraud from a major distributor lowering dough quality in hundreds of stores for millions of families in food deserts. Domino's wasn't a luxury, it was a warm meal when the stove was broken. For part-time workers, it was the only job that fit their schedule. Now, in towns like Flint and Pueblo, the lights are off and nothing's coming to the door anymore. And if even delivery, our last convenience, can be undone by a slipping currency, what comforts do we truly have left? Number 9, Popeyes. The best fried chicken in town has become a luxury not because the recipe changed, but because your country's money just doesn't count the way it used to. After its viral chicken sandwich exploded in 2019, Popeyes transformed from a regional favorite into a national powerhouse. By 2021, it had more than 3,400 US locations, with spicy Cajun flavors and affordable combos that felt generous, familiar, and real. But in 2025, the spice is fading. Over 110 Popeyes restaurants have closed in just 18 months. Behind every shuttered door are rising prices, shrinking margins, and a silent financial shift far beyond the fryer. 2 ingredients. Popeyes can't live without chicken, and cooking oil have turned against them. With over 40,000 US farms gone, domestic poultry supply has dried up. Popeyes turned to Asia and South America, but these suppliers now demand payment in yuan or local currencies, not US dollars. China's global trade now settles over 40% in yuan, and with the dollar down 6% in global value, everything costs more. Oil from China, Indonesia, and India, vital for every fry, has followed the same path. Combo meals that once cost $7.90 now top $12. Franchisees report up to 30% increases in base supply costs. Many can't keep up. Cities and small towns alike are losing stores not from lack of love, but from a money system that no longer works like it used to. The damage isn't just economic, it's human. In many Black and Latino communities, Popeyes wasn't fast food. It was a space, a gathering point, a break from the grind. Now, teens lose their first jobs, single moms lose a warm meal, and entire blocks lose a taste of something that felt like home. Meanwhile, Popeyes' parent company, RBI, is facing its own shadow. In 2023, reports surfaced of expired spices and oil used past safety limits due to supply delays. A separate probe revealed that franchisees were pressured into opening in failing areas. Many lost everything, while competitors like Raising Cane's pivoted toward regional sourcing. Popeyes stayed stuck between rapid expansion and unstable imports. It broke in the middle. And when even a fried chicken meal, simple, soulful, and unmistakably American, gets priced out by a currency war we didn't start, what's left on the plate for us to hold on to? Number 10, Jack in the Box. What if the drive-thru that once fed you after every graveyard shift suddenly locked its windows, not from lack of demand, but because your money no longer meant anything? Jack in the Box was built on convenience. It served truckers at 2 a.m., students between classes, and single parents too tired to cook. Its $1.49 sandwiches, tacos, and late-night breakfast made it a cornerstone in the western and southern U.S., operating over 2,200 locations by the late 2010s. But by 2025, the lights are flickering out. More than 90 stores have closed since 2023, and it's not just about profits, it's about currency. The food may be American, but the ingredients aren't. Spices, sauces, oil, cheese, much of it comes from Mexico, China, or Southeast Asia. Today, those suppliers no longer want US dollars. With China's yuan now settling over 40% of its global trade, the dollar is steadily losing ground. Bloomberg confirms the greenback has dropped more than 6% in global value since January 2025. Jack in the Box without centralized buying power can't keep up. Franchisees are drowning in unpredictable contracts and supply costs that double overnight. Fry oil shortages, frozen meat delays, even cheese wrappers are now overpriced. And unlike competitors like Sonic or Carl's Jr., Jack in the Box's wide menu and decentralized model make adaptation nearly impossible. The government's response? Silence. While China strengthens its trade bloc, small American food chains get no aid, no buffer, no currency protection. Meanwhile, inside the company, trust is crumbling. A leaked 2023 memo revealed cost-cutting measures that risked food safety, including extended oil use beyond safe limits, combined with a history of foodborne outbreaks. This brand's image, already fragile, has taken another blow. For the workers, this isn't just about fried chicken or breakfast burritos. These were jobs for immigrants, veterans, and part-timers who needed night hours and fast promotions. In places like Odessa, TX, or Barstow, CA, the loss of Jack in the Box isn't abstract, it's empty bellies and closed paychecks. And when even a drive-through, the last open door when everything else is closed, disappears because your country's money no longer buys trust abroad, what's left to call comfort food? If the dollar can no longer guarantee a hot meal, a steady job, or a simple sandwich, what else might slip away next without a sound? These closures aren't just about food, they're about trust, identity, and the quiet unraveling of what Americans once believed was untouchable. When your money stops working in the global system, it's not just your lunch that disappears. Could it be your place in the world?